Hi everyone, my name is Vincenzo Berghella. Welcome again to another sessions of AJOG MFM Live with the Extraordinaire within me, the brainchild of Drs Narang, my friend and colleague here. We have an extraordinary guest today. I guess first of all I should say Happy New Year to everyone. It's December 31st today. We'll wish everyone a wonderful new year, and Kavita, take it away.
Thank you so much, Vince. And yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our visitors from all over the world, and a very happy new year to everyone. And to wrap up this beautiful year, we have a very, very special guest with us today, which I'm so grateful for your time, Dr. Uma Reddy, to give us this hour on this final day of the year. To everyone, Dr. Reddy is currently the Vice Chair of Research and Professor of OBGYN at Columbia University in New York. She's also the principal investigator for the MFMU network at Columbia and previously served as the medical officer at the NIH in the pregnancy branch. In addition to her clinical and research work, Dr. Reddy is a very respected educator and mentor in the field and loved by everyone that's had the opportunity to work with her. This new year also brings a very exciting opportunity as she transitions from her role at Columbia and will be moving to Yale to be the executive vice chair of the Department of OBGYN and Reproductive Sciences. We are so, so grateful to have you here with us, Dr. Reddy. And, as always, we start all our sessions with a bit of gratitude. So I'll pass the mic to you and maybe share something you're grateful for. And thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Kavita and Vincenzo. It's really an honor to be asked to do this, and I'm really excited about the upcoming new year. So happy new year, everyone. I feel that I have so much to be grateful for, first and foremost, my family. My husband of 32 years has been, an incredible support to me and has kept me grounded. My parents. My dad has passed away, and my mom is 88 years old, and they raised the three of us. I'm the youngest of three girls. So when my parents came from India for my dad to get his PhD in engineering, and my mom, just finished college, and that was it. And then they came. They instilled in the three of us that we could do anything, that anything was possible, and to think big. And my mom is like one of the smartest people I know. She's just so wise. And she ended up working for a Metropolitan Insurance Company doing actuarial work. She's very good with numbers. So she retooled herself to be able to do that work while, we were young. And a few years ago, she said to us that she actually had gotten into medical school, but her father said she couldn't go, and so she didn't go. And, I realized we're incredibly grateful for the opportunity that I've had to go to medical school and to be a doctor. And so I think, I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful also for my education. So I grew up in New York. In sixth grade, I was asked to take a test for Hunter College High School. My parents didn't know anything about it. I took the test. I got in. I had to take a subway ride for 45 minutes to go to the school. My friend got in. And so my dad's like, okay, well, the two of you can travel together and you have a big buddy. They assigned an eighth grader who was also from the neighborhood to go with us, who was going to school. And so he said, okay, if you had to take a test, it must be a good school. So we'll go ahead and let you go. And that was an incredible opportunity that, meeting kids from all over New York City, motivated, bright, it was diverse. That set my trajectory, that I'm so grateful that I had an excellent public school education. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was this past year has been really hard for people like me who've been in research with the terminated grants. I had a terminated grant focused on maternal health equity and improving outcomes in New York City and New York State, and the incredible support all around the country from people I didn't even know. OBGYN colleagues, MFM colleagues, trainees, even just reaching out and saying, we're so sorry. We've heard about what happened to you. hope you're, stay, we support you. And, the incredible support from all around the country from our field was really inspiring, and, gave me the motivation to continue to try to, get it, restarted again. And it did. So I'm just so grateful.
Wow. Wow, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I feel like that's such a wholesome and reflective gratitude, and it got me thinking about so much about my journey this year too. So no, thank you so much for sharing that, and we'll have lots of questions to touch on based on all the stories you already started sharing, which was wonderful. But Vince, I'll pass it to you to share something you're grateful for as well.
Well, I'm grateful for Uma, here today. I actually just came back Sunday from 9 days in Italy. With my wife Federica, my rock, the 4 kids were there. My mom is 87, actually, Uma. Yours is 88. She's turning 88 in 2 weeks. So same age. She's still alive and doing pretty good, considering the age. So it was great to see her. Took lots of pictures, and then we went to see my in-laws and parents and. My sister-in-law, father-in-law, nieces, nephews, we skied in the Dolomites. It was a lot of fun, very family-friendly and concentrated. And so I'm very, very grateful for family and the relationship I have with them. And actually, one of my nieces had a baby yesterday as well, Livia.
Congratulations.
Congrats to her and the new baby, new generation. Now their grandmother is a great-grandmother. It's amazing how things change. Yeah.
That is so special. Well, congratulations to your family, and I'm so happy you have had a wonderful year. Thank you for sharing that, Vince. For me, I would reflect the same. I think, at the end of the day, I'm just truly grateful for all the people in my life, my family. My parents are all still back home in Thailand, and my whole family is back there. But, to be able to, I just had a lovely call with them because it's almost New Year's there already. So, just my husband, my kids here, and just all the wonderful, loving people in life, whether family or work or colleagues or even beautiful mentors like you both being here and spending the hour with me and, helping me learn and grow. And I'm grateful for all the opportunities that came my way this year. I moved, started a new job, and it's just been an incredible journey, and it leaves me feeling very excited for next year. So I'm grateful for all of it. Thank you. And, Uma, so we like to jump right in, and you already kind of touched on this. One of my favorite questions to always open the session is, how your childhood shaped your career and upbringing here, and you talked about your high school and your mom, which is like so inspiring. Now, can you tell us a little bit, are your other siblings also in medicine? How has your journey been to get to this point?
Yeah, so I do. Yeah, so I have 2 sisters, and one is a psychiatrist, and then the other one is in finance and works for the office of the comptroller, actually. So they audit banks. So both very accomplished themselves. And like I said, actually, going to Hunter really changed my trajectory because just the classes and experiences, and like we would, have assignments. I'd be like, I can't believe we have to go to a museum and like write about, what, exhibits are the most interesting and why. And they pushed us like that. But actually, senior year, they had this program where they said, if you could take full day classes like everybody, or you could spend half a day in an experience either working or doing something that contributes to your development. And at that point, I had got into bridge. So every day, starting in 11th grade, I played bridge with 3 people, 3 guys. Oh, actually 1 woman and 2 guys. So we were friends. We started playing bridge at lunch, and I loved it. I was like a total geek, right? So we would eat lunch and play bridge. And then we got to senior year, and the 3 of them were like, we found a perfect thing. So Mount Sinai is nearby. We can, volunteer. They have research labs, but, we can spend 2 hours in the cafeteria, free lunch, and we can play bridge. And then we can, go to the, internship and, just work in those labs. And I was like, okay, it sounds good. We can continue to play bridge. So it sounds good. So that's what we did. And then initially in the lab, it was a biochemistry lab. And, I wasn't particularly interested, but, I did, they showed me how to make gels and these skills. And, then slowly I started to ask what are we doing here? Start to understand the point of the lab. And they were, studying this important enzyme and heme synthesis. And then, the head of the lab, realized I was actually taking an interest. It wasn't more than just, doing the lab function so they can do their experiments, and explained it to me and the importance of, heme synthesis and this particular enzyme, the diseases it was involved in, and said, if you're willing to do a literature search and help us, you could be part of the paper. And so by the end, that was like they included me on the paper, but it was really interesting. So I was really interested in I thought basic science research was very interesting. And then, I went to Brown for undergrad. And so, I worked a year in a viral oncology lab. And, I thought that was, what I was really interested in. So I really, attribute the research bug, from that experience at Mount Sinai, actually. And then, in college, my freshman year, my husband lived above me. And so we met the first day of college, which also was his birthday. He turned 18. And I have to say, it took much longer time for us to get married. But it took 7 years later. But, neither of us, had parents who were doctors. But, he too was interested. He was pre-med. He knew he wanted to do pediatrics. And so he, went to medical school at Hopkins, and I ended up doing my residency at Hopkins. So we had the world in front of us. We graduated with a lot of debt in medical school, both of us. I mean, it's equivalent to a huge amount now. I mean, it was a huge amount then. But we worked hard to get where we were. We felt that we should do what we want in life, like out of our career. We're going to pick what we want to do. And he's had really satisfying career as well in pediatric infectious diseases and maternal infant HIV transmission. So I'm really proud of him, our two sons. My older son, Vikram, decided late that he wanted to go to medical school and be a pediatrician. And so now he is a chief resident here in Austin. I'm with him right now. Adult Children's Hospital, and he's going to do a fellowship in developmental behavioral pediatrics. Our younger son, Vinod, is an engineer, and he works for the Department of Energy on the electric grid infrastructure and improving it, which even I understand needs improvement. So really, I'm just so proud of them and what they're doing and their dedication to helping others. And our family's gotten bigger. So Vic got married, and he and his wife, Anisha, who's wonderful. And it turns out she's an OBGYN resident.
Oh,
yeah. And I'm so glad that his mom being an OBGYN didn't rule her out, that he didn't hold it against her. So that's also reassuring, the work-life balance. And I have a beautiful granddaughter. Her name is Leela, and she's 3 months old. So I couldn't be any more happier or ask for anything more from my family. In terms of my career, you asked me, well, you haven't, yeah, but what I've been proud about my career has been, the work that I've done in identifying, gaps in obstetrics and coordinating major studies across multiple collaborators and institutions to study important questions, and being able to balance both.
Wow.
I've been so impressed, Uma. It's great to share all this warm feeling, about family.
Yeah.
And, we've been friends for, I guess, maybe 30 years or so. And I've followed you, so impressed about your relationship with your wonderful husband and your two kids. You always talk about them first every time we meet. And now you're going to talk about your granddaughter, which is great. One thing, since we're at the beginning, is I always like to ask about, drive, and you touched on it first, because, like you said, it takes a lot of work, to get to where you are. And as we will later go into your career choices and steps, you mentioned your mother. What can you expand on that? On where you found the fire within. We have had a lot of first generation people. Maybe being a lot of people. Like you had the experience. Your mom got in medical school, but couldn't go. How do those things shape you? I think we're shaped from those experiences since we're 4 or 6 or 8. Very early on in life, and maybe you could expand on looking back, what gave you that passion, to study so hard and with a big smile, like you always have, in such a positive way, do some things that to others are pretty amazing.
I mean, I find, our field so interesting. And like, looking back on it, actually, I wasn't one of those people. So when I was in high school, like I liked science, I loved math, but I also liked, I love reading. Like I mean, for me, reading novels, just reading the paper. I'm an avid reader as well. I think that I feel like medicine, we get to do all of that, and be part of people's lives and help them. And so when I finished high school, I wasn't sure about being a doctor. Actually, I had applied to, also I thought engineering. I was good. I would have been a horrible engineer, even though I'm good at math. I'm not very handy. I don't like fixing things. I kind of like delegate it to others. But I think, my experience with like, I really felt that my experiences, like I, worked, I volunteered in a hospital, and just talking to patients. This was in high school, plus the research and seeing how the research can improve, lives, make a significant impact. And seeing that early, was really, motivated me. And then my mom was always, I mean, she is so wise. She's also reads, avid reader. I get that from her. But even like, she would ask me questions about, like, when I was like talking about science classes or whatever, just really insightful questions. And then, even through undergraduate, and when I decided, in medical schools, she would ask me questions, and always does. Like, if you talk about patients, she'll always ask me questions. I'm like, wow, why didn't I think about that? Or, why hasn't anyone thought about that? And then she's also really great with her hands. Like she knits, she crochets, she quilts. She just, there's something about her. Like she's quietly wise too. So if you meet her, people talk to her, like she's relatively quiet, but people talk to her and tell her about her life. So, it's funny. My dad, I had mentioned, he was an engineer. And so people always say, oh, you got your, brains from him. It's both of them.
Wow. No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Because, I think you're right. Sometimes people look at the external career and as the only person who gives brains, but like you got so much wisdom from your mom, even though, she didn't have all that. That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, in your career, if you you've had such a profound and successful career, for yourself, and have impacted and inspired generations of trainees after that. When you take let's say a 30,000 foot view of your career or your life, what would you say are 3 pivotal moments, that shaped your career or you? And if you can share some of the stories around those moments, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I think one pivotal moment was in medical school. So I had not started off being interested in OBGYN per se. The second year, I was a second-year medical student, and we had pathophysiology, and we had a 2-week course on the pathophysiology of the reproductive system. And Dr. Don Kustan was leading our section of 10 people. So we were there, 10 students. And at the end of the 2 weeks, he said to me afterwards, he goes, "Wow, you did really well on the exam, and you seem very interested. Are you interested in going into OBGYN?" And then by that time, so my dad's younger sister had become an OBGYN, and I was like, no, I have an aunt who's an OBGYN, and she says it's really hard. I'm actually interested. I think, I like neurology, and I like, we had a course on that, and I like, ophtho. I think ophthalmology might be my field. He's like, "Oh, okay, well, that's too bad. But yeah, you just seem like you were very interested in this." And then I did my OBGYN rotation last. I purposely picked it last. So I did that you had to do all your core clerkships. And then I loved the clerkship. I had wonderful attendings. I had him again on service. And I was like, wow, this is a phenomenal field to, be part of women's lives. And I just, outpatient, inpatient, I loved all aspects of it. And just, taking care of, the entire woman and her health. And it was just so interesting. So then I did my ophtho elective, which I had been looking forward to, and I couldn't stand it. I was just so bored, outpatient. I couldn't wait till it to be over. And then after that, I had, ophtho was very competitive. So I had set up a rotation for research at Hopkins. And so I had, this really preeminent ophthalmologist, researcher, Dr. Irene Womany. I had set it up as a visiting medical student from Brown. So I went down there, and, there was no email or anything. I went down, I had talked to her, multiple times on the phone. Anyway, I get to her office, and we're talking, and she's talking about the project, and she's like, "You don't seem as interested as you were before." I said, "Well, actually, I've changed my mind. I'm going to apply for OBGYN. But, like I said, I was going to work on this research project for the next 6 weeks. I'm going to work on it. So don't worry about it." She's like, "I have a list a mile long of people who want to do research with me. Don't worry about it. You should do research then in OBGYN." And I'm like, "Well, I don't really know anyone here. I'm a visiting medical student." And so she's like, "Well," she opens the book and she's like, "Okay, maternal fetal medicine, Dr. Tim Johnson is the division director. You should go over and just tell him you want to do research." I'm like, "Just walk over?" She's like, "Yeah." And she told me how to get there. So I get there, and he has 2 assistants, admin assistants sitting outside his door. And they're like, "Who are you?" I said, "I want to make an appointment with Dr. Johnson. Is it possible to meet with him tomorrow?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Sometime this week?" They're like, "No." I said, "How about next week?" They're like, "No, he's very busy." And then I started sweating. I was like, "Oh my God, here I am. I signed up for a rotation for 6 weeks. I have nothing. This is not good." I guess I could go back to doing the ophtho research. Then he came out actually, and he looked up. He's like, "Who are you?" And I explained I was a visiting medical student, that I want to do research. And I'm not making this up. He said, "Come in here." And he handed me a stack of papers and said, "Here, take these papers and come back tomorrow at 8 a.m. and tell me if you can come up with a research project." Wow. And so I did. I read those papers. I pulled an all-nighter with him. We came up with a research project. And, at the time, they had a monitor that could did non-stress tests and could pick up fetal movement. And there was the thought that as you go closer to term and in labor, that there's decreased fetal movement, actually. So that was the thought. There were some papers on that. But there wasn't really good evidence. And, obviously thinking that fetal movements decrease in labor, that has clinical implications if you're thinking that's the norm. So he said, "Okay, well, you can use this monitor. Let's monitor." And came up with a study design. So I monitored I wanted normal patients in labor to monitor fetal movements with this monitor and to characterize it. And that's what I did. So I was there on the labor and delivery unit at, all hours. It was very hard to find normal patients. So I was pretty vigilant in finding those patients. And that was my first research project.
Wow.
And, I went back to Brown, and I ended up, doing, more, maternal fetal medicine and sub-Is, and just loving it and applying for it. And then in the meantime, so I was a fourth year, and SMFN, which was the SPO, Society for Perinatal Obstetricians, Dr. Johnson reached out and said, yeah, you should send an abstract of your results. And, back then, medical students didn't, they didn't present at meetings or anything like that. So, he helped me write the abstract. I sent it in. It got accepted for poster. The meeting was in San Francisco. I didn't have money to go to San Francisco. So, he helped pay for me to go to San Francisco. I went to SMFM meeting and was just like blown away by the research and how much is being done, how much we didn't know, meeting, people in our field. And he introduced me to lots of people. So that was pivotal. That changed the entire trajectory. Another point where I think my trajectory was changed was when I was a fellow at Jefferson. Vincenzo was our attending, and I was a fellow. And, just the wonderful research going on. It was part of the Maternal Fetal Medicine Units Network. And Ron Wapner was our fellowship director. And he would question every single thing. Like whatever we said, he would say, why? Why do you do that? And I just realized how little we knew. And then, at that time, we were giving steroids every single week to patients. And he goes, does that make sense? I'm like, of course it does. Everybody's like, well, if they're undelivered, they could deliver in the next week. And then they wouldn't have the benefit of steroids in their preterm. And, he ended up doing a study showing that that was not the case, that it wasn't helpful. And in fact, it was, in the short term harmful. And he really just inspired me to, again, like more clinical research. So, by that time, I was much more interested in doing clinical research. And a couple of things that he did that really made the difference was I said I wanted to get a master's degree in epidemiology and biostats. And so he supported me in doing that. So originally, Penn had an excellent program, but it was 2 years. It was extremely expensive. But I had taken class at Hopkins, so I could do it in a more condensed time in 9 months. And so he said, yes, we'll support you, the tuition. You can do that, but you cannot miss a single call. You cannot, miss anything clinical. And I said, absolutely. And so, I did every call that I was supposed to. I drove down to Hopkins, did my classes, drove all the way back to Philadelphia, would take call. And but that was an incredible, I learned so much that year. It gave me the skill set to be able to do research, clinical trial design, all those basics I got there. So without Ron, that support. And also, when I first started off fellowship, he was incredibly supportive. I had my younger son, Vinod, in August of starting fellowship, and I had a very difficult delivery, actually. And so I ended up with a repeat C-section. He ended up in the NICU. And I had a very difficult delivery, and so my recovery, was very, it was very difficult in the sense that I was anemic, and so I, ended up, requiring. Repeat C-section, if it's a sort of repeat, is okay, but I went, got to complete and pushed and ended up with a C-section. We didn't have the data we have now on that scenario. And so, at that time, everyone VBAC'd, and so that's what I did. And this is also fed into my interest in C-section and how we can do C-sections, indicated C-sections, and lowering the rate safely, which has been an area of interest of mine. But anyway, so it was really difficult coming back. And Ron was like, I understand what you went through. Take your time. He was so understanding. I don't think without his support then, I would have been able to actually finish the first year of fellowship. And so he, personally and professionally was the, epitome of a mentor in every way, and has continued to be to this day. Okay, that's this. I have second one. Okay, and then the third one, you asked for three.
No, these are amazing. Yes, please keep going.
Yeah, so I would say, so I was, pretty much I felt like I was an academic MFM. So I did my fellowship. My fellowship project was a translational project. We had a patient who ruptured membranes, and they tried to reseal her membranes, and she got to, and she had lost multiple pregnancies, and she had ruptured her membranes early with oligohydramnios. She wanted everything done. And so they tried to reseal her membranes using cryoprecipitate, and she got to 29 weeks and, delivered and, had a, very preterm baby, but, baby who, survived without major neonatal morbidity. So I became interested in that. So I did a translational experiment where I took second trimester membranes. And so I wanted to do this. So I wanted to take second trimester membranes and see in the lab, what would be the best thing to reseal them, because, cryoprecipitate blood products from the patient themselves is, very involved and complicated. And there was this thing called Tisseel, fibrin glue, that they were using for ECMO to seal the catheter. So I thought maybe that would be, helpful for resealing the membranes. So where do I get second trimester membranes? Well, it turned out at Pennsylvania Hospital, there was a physician who was, very, he did a lot of DNCs. So I went and talked to him, and I said, these membranes, I'd be very interested in collecting them for this lab experiment. He's like, yeah, sure. What do you want us to do? I said, I just need you to put them in the media, and I'll come by and pick them up. So this was a different hospital, Pennsylvania Hospital. And it turned out they had their own IRB. They had a Penn IRB. So then I had to get approval from the Penn IRB for, this study. And I met with the chair. I don't know, they had me talk to the chair about my thing, who was Jack Ludmere. So here I am, from a different fellowship. Penn, has their wonderful fellowship and their research projects. And I'm from Jefferson. And I explained it to him. He goes, that's a really important project. Yes, you can, I'll sign off on, your project. So I got IRB approval. Then the physician I was working with, Dr. Nemiroff, was like, so what are you doing exactly? And I explained to him. And then he's like, it would be better if you did your experiment this way, because you need to, puncture the membranes, rupture happens from inside out, or from outside in instead of inside out. So the way you puncture membranes, I would change that. And I was like, wow. Here he is. He's just in clinical. It's very important. He's in clinical practice, but he was very interested in the research. And I said, do you want to be a part of the research? And he's like, yeah, I would like to be. And then I ended up getting a blood bank involved, and the idea of multidisciplinary research, getting people from different disciplines to work on research together, came from this project. And so this was my project. It got, published in AJOG, and it has 20 people on it, but they helped me. So really, I think that was really important. So anyway, my idea was to be an academic attending, so I took a job at University of Maryland, and, 80% clinical, 20% research. And I think the pivotal moment was, I had wanted to, when I was a fellow, I got offered a job at NIH, at NICHD intramural. So I was very interested in doing that, working half-time at NICHD and then working half-time at Hopkins. And I had pretty much that was going to be my position after I graduated. But like 3 months before, it turned out it was going to be very difficult in terms of malpractice. I would have to work, even I was working half-time, I would have to do full-time call because they would have to pay full malpractice. Anyway, bunch of logistical issues, plus the fact that my husband was about to start his pediatric ID fellowship. We had 2 young kids, childcare, that I decided that, it wasn't going to work out. And I, took the position at University of Maryland in MFM. Anyway, but I had met a lot of people at NICHD, learned about its mission. So I was at SMFM and I had an oral presentation that I was presenting, and Kathy Spahn came up to me and said, you've been doing good research. I've seen, an article or 2 from you. So, have you ever thought about working at NICHD? I said, like when I interviewed for intramural, the week after, I said, but I'm happy, I said, I'm happy. I'm doing, the research. It's less than I want to do, but, I can only do so much. It's very hard with a very busy clinical job. Anyway, so a week later, she contacted me and Dr. Dwayne Alexander, who's head of NICHD, and they said, there was a position at NICHD that they thought I would be really good for. So I went and interviewed. And even after my interview, they said, they were interested in pharmacology, they were interested in adverse pregnancy outcomes, they needed, someone, an MFM to, lead research in these areas. But I wasn't really sure, like after the interviews, like what would I be doing exactly? But I knew that that's when I had to make a decision. And this was a risk. I was like, do I, join NICHD and leave the typical academic track, or do I continue the typical academic track? And I decided to take the risk and go. And I really, that definitely changed my career.
Wow. It's been amazing, Uma, and you're painting such a beautiful picture of your life, personal and professional. I love, almost all the strokes of all the colors and things. I guess we can take it from there. I think that obviously one of your, major accomplishment among many, leading the NICHD, maternal fetal medicine unit network. Can you tell us about that experience? What for our young, listeners, inspire them about what you've done at the NICHD, what the process is, how to get involved. I know you enjoyed it, and I think it's one of the best things we have in our specialty, if not the best thing we have in our specialty still, despite the difficulty in research. So you were there for quite a few years and eventually led it. Maybe you can expand on that experience.
Yeah, and I didn't lead it when I first started, so right. Yeah, so I needed to get experience. So I actually started with stillbirth. So a parent had written to NICHD and said, "How come I had a stillbirth? There's no information. What research have you done on stillbirth?" Mm-hmm. And at the time, they had decided to fund a study on stillbirth in the U.S. So that was actually the first thing I got tasked with. When I got there, was to work with actually Marion Willinger, who's a PhD neuroscientist who had been there for like 15 years. So and this is, why it's important to think outside our field. So she was responsible for doing the research, leading research within the U.S. on back to sleep and showing that was associated with decreased rate in SIDS. So they paired us together and said, come up with a study on stillbirth, risk factors and causes of stillbirth. So we together led the Stillbirth Collaborative Research Network. And really that study was my first experience with coordinating large-scale research. And this was population-based research. So we were covering different counties in the U.S. And it wasn't just the 5 major academic institutions that, were part of the grant. It was hospitals community hospitals in those counties, which participated, because every patient who had a stillbirth in these counties, we wanted to approach them and do a complete workup to understand why the stillbirth happened. And then we wanted representative population of controls of women with live births to understand the risk factors and causes. So that study was, that network, and it was 5 years, and the research we produced from that, and coordinating across sites, and then getting expert, when admitting what we don't know and getting expertise outside of centers. So really, I think that helped prepare me for the maternal fetal medicine units network. And then, I worked on other studies. I think one of the pivotal studies was a consortium on safe labor. So Jim Zhang was a perinatal epidemiologist at the time, and he came, it's been more than 15 years, he came to my office and he's like, I want to do a study on labor curves, because I don't think the Friedman curve, which was what we were using as standard of care, 4 centimeters, I don't think, it accelerates, labor accelerates, active labor starts at 4 centimeters. I have some data, old data, but I don't think so. What do you think? I said, yeah, I always thought, like, you leave, when there's delays on labor and delivery and we don't get to, section the patient, they've been 4 centimeters for hours, but we, like they had to wait for their C-section, and then you find they've progressed. That happens all the time. Yeah, patience is important. A lot of people do practice patience. They don't wait, they don't instantly say, oh, it's been 4 centimeters. So I think you're right, but how could we do this kind of study? You would need you would need 100,000, labor curves. He's like, actually, you would need 200,000. Like, wow. And he goes, yeah, what do you think are the most important things that we would need to be able to do this study besides, let's say we got 200,000. So I talked to him about, like, what kind of data would be critical to collect to understand, what the labor curve would be. And I think the combination of me working with him, we ended up, doing the consortium on safe labor. We put an ad in the Green Journal because it was done on a shoestring budget. We put an ad in the Green Journal, but asking for sites who could, meet these criteria, had electronic records, had timestamps of intrapartum exams, et cetera. And so that, thinking of the important questions and how to operationalize doing them was also critical, helped us, helped me in preparing for the MFMU. And then another study I was involved with before taking on the MFMU was new mom to be. So there was a lot of, clinical care, MFM, if you had a complication in your first pregnancy, we would, do more intensive surveillance, and we wanted to prevent the recurrent pregnancy. But there was a recurrent pregnancy complication, but there was hardly anything on first pregnancies, women who are nulliparous. So I was like, this is the population we need to study. So I proposed twice a study, starting in the first trimester, to look at prediction of adverse pregnancy outcomes, preeclampsia, preterm birth. And I got shot down twice. It's a fishing expedition. You're not, yeah, you're right. We don't have a lot of information on first pregnancies. Yeah, you're right. If we could prevent the first, happening the first time. But then, finally, through persistence, got it approved, and we did it. And then, here we are 15 years later, and now we're understanding the relationship of adverse pregnancy outcomes to long-term cardiovascular and metabolic health. So, for me, for the maternal fetal medicine units network, doing all these other studies and getting that skill set really poised me to be able to take on the MFMU. But like getting involved, as a early stage, faculty member, fellows, it's much easier now. When I was at Jefferson with you, Vincenzo, we helped recruit for those studies, but, trainees were not, particularly involved at the sites otherwise. Now, the data sets are being made publicly available through NICHD. They have a data archive, specimen hub, so you can access studies. You can access, through the sites themselves, more recent studies. But so anyway, as you could propose studies to the MFMU. So it's much easier to get involved.
Wow. I could just listen to you share all day. I'm like, this is a beautiful story. It can keep going. I wasn't ready for it to end. It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Yeah, it's just, hearing you talk about your journey gets me excited about research. You're so passionate about it. Your drive comes through so beautifully. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Along your whole journey, I'm sure there's been, of course, challenges and, like that times when things went excellent. And, can you share a little bit, anytime if you hit a roadblock or things got hard, what is a certain mindset maybe that helped you push through, or what are some core values you hold with you as you go through your journey, in life or in medicine?
Yeah, no. So yeah, I had challenges. I would say, first of all, like during fellowship, I mentioned how I had a complicated delivery and it took just physically, time to recover from that, and even mentally, because, you as an OBGYN and an MFM fellow to, have 2 C-sections and to have a repeat C-section, and I, and both my boys were in the NICU. And of course I was like, I could kick myself, you blame yourself. Like first time, my son was in NICU for rule out sepsis. The second time, my son was in the NICU. He was jaundice. He had a subgaleal hematoma, which thankfully he didn't need to be transfused, but was very, concerning. So, I think, fellowship was very challenging with that, and, childcare. And thankfully we found, I was having difficulty finding childcare. We found a wonderful nanny. So we were able to, and my husband too, he worked as an attending because someone had to work. We owed money and stuff. So he worked as an attending at Bryn Mawr Hospital. And he also worked at Jefferson. So, we were able to, get by. But, in terms of fellowship, I have to say, I was not the most successful fellowship. I had probably a highest abstract to actual paper ratio, not in a good way. I had lots of abstracts, but conversion to papers was very few. I had 2 papers out of fellowship. I remember Ron Wapner, he's like, you have these, you had 5 abstracts, but you don't have any papers coming out of these things. You really need to, and he goes, some of these, abstracts are very good and need to be, you need to get them published. So and I would get down on myself. I see other people being more productive and think, I should be, and I had one paper that literally was pretty much written, but I perseverated. It just needed a little more work and I didn't do it. I eventually did not get published. It was really bad because then, so I would get on my, I'd be like, why, how am I going to, be more productive compared to like, what I've been doing. I try to, but I accepted it. I said, I think this is the key. There are going to be times in your life that you're not going to be productive. Something is going to come up, life circumstances, health circumstances, whatever, work circumstances, personal issues, and that you're not going to be able to, devote yourself to your work, fully, or do what you think you can do, and accept that. But, that will resolve and then you can become more productive. I think accepting that.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Of course, sorry for the challenges, but that, being so vulnerable about sharing that, because I think a lot of, people, younger people, when you go through these phases of, like this, when things are slowing down, people, like you said, people can be really hard on themselves. And recognizing that priorities can fluctuate, I think is so important, especially for women, especially when you have children, you feel like you have this responsibility to be a great mom and still perform at the same level at work. And it's okay to give yourself some grace. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Vince, it sounded like you had a question. Go for it.
No, Uma, it's been good. I hope people are getting from this, also your attitude, Uma. You're always like this, like you're today, positive, even keeled, strong in a very gentle way, if I can describe it that way. And I think, how people perceive you, I remember you obviously very well as a fellow. We've been friends since. And I think your personal success and professional success also come from you being so positive, available, put up a good face in a difficult situation, even if things may not be going well. And I guess the next question was, you've had so many opportunities, a change in Maryland, NSHD, Yale, Columbia, etc. How do you make, maybe it's good for people to understand how you make career choices. You touched on it some, some was family related, opportunities that came around, but I guess, people are sometimes too afraid to leave a place, or maybe they're too eager to leave a place. How were those decisions made? And another thing I've been impressed to, and I think it's to your credit, is that you remain friends and involved with everyone, with NSHD or with Columbia or with Maryland or with, my son went to Brown, so I have a soft spot for Brown College, and then you went also to medical school there. So those personal, relationships and the career choices, that's the question.
Yeah, I think I've always had a global outlook on, my work, and that it's not, just my institution that I'm at, because I've been fortunate to work at wonderful institutions with wonderful colleagues and trainees and staff, and that, I feel like in terms of making a job change, for me, it was always about, what am I interested in? So I feel like you should trust your intuition, and like, what are you interested in? What makes you satisfied? What do you find rewarding? Because I do, initially in my career, research, even though it was clear from the beginning I loved research, that until NICHD, it was hesitant, it was hard. It was hesitant about it because it was taking a gamble. But, what satisfies you and where can you do that the best, should be driving you. I should be doing, like, you shouldn't be doing activities or committees or whatever because it looks good, or you should, we've gotten to this point in our careers. And by being an OBGYN resident, it's taken an incredible amount of work. So your career is important. It should be satisfying. And that should, drive your moves, basically, I think. That's what's, so seeing, what resources a place has, the mentorship, their capability areas that you're interested in. Because I think, all of us, academic medicine, what keeps us in academic medicine, for all of us, clinical care, making a difference in patients' lives, that's incredibly rewarding. Having patients, have a good outcome, and, they're so thankful for the care. That's all the reward we need in our field. But even, we have bad outcomes, helping the family cope with that, the grief, being there, showing that you care, facilitating that is so important. So I feel like our field, we're very, lucky. It's incredibly rewarding, and it's tough. So I think finding the other than clinical care, what, you're interested in. For me, it was research. Other people are very interested in administration and how to deliver, clinical care, teaching, whatever it is. Positioning yourself in getting a job that you can do that. And you may not be able to get that right away, right? Because, some of these positions, you need experience, but, being patient with yourself too.
If I can expand on that, Kavita, real quick.
Yes, please.
So it sounds like, you kind of decide what you like to do, design your perfect day, and try to find the institution where, that perfect day, can be done, and that may change over time. Right now, what's one of the things you like to do the most? What are things that, make you go in flow? I remember Cynthia Jaffe, to my surprise, said having an SPSS file in front of her and working the numbers, which really surprised me from a chairman. But for you, what's something that really, you would do for free, like, you love to do, of all the things you do?
Yeah, of all the things, I think brainstorming on big ideas. I love that. Actually, someone yesterday reached out to me from a different institution and said they wanted to brainstorm about a grant idea. So I think, really thinking about, to me, that's what excites me, is like talking to someone, in the field about ideas, to really tackle the big problems. I mean, we have so many different issues we could be dealing with, our high rates of, pregnancy complications compared to other countries. And, I'm convinced that, we have to address the disparity. I mean, different race, ethnicities, and communities are much, they have high rates, and we have to get to the bottom of it. And so, that's something, this is more, I've been doing more patient-centered, community engaged research, and I find that really satisfying. C-section rates, an area, Vincenzo, you've been working on for a long time. We still have a persistently high C-section rate. So, tackling that. But I think, so brainstorming about these ideas is what I love.
Wow. No, that's really inspiring. That's awesome. And, we have last few minutes. I do have a couple real quick questions I do want to touch on. If I had to see Uma outside of the workspace doing something that she loves the most, what is one fun thing you love doing outside of work?
Well, I have a couple of things. I love the beach. I absolutely love the beach. I love sitting and reading on the beach, walking along the beach, going in the water. I love kayaking. Stand-up paddleboarding. I do it. Taking the risk of doing that. So I really, to me, it's very peaceful. It got me through COVID, walking up and down the beach. I lived close to the beach in the beginning of COVID. And the other thing is my sons are avid football fans. So they were both born in Baltimore. They are Ravens fans. We are season ticket holders. We actually go to the games when they're home games, wherever we are. And actually it turns out I'm actually good at fantasy football too.
Wow.
Yeah. Out of 16 teams on my husband's side of the family.
Oh my God.
There's a trophy. And it's really the trophy. The money is like, but it's the pride anyway. So
that is so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And we love to end with, if there is one word you could use to describe yourself, what would that be?
I would say focused. People say that I am hard to distract. So my family, colleagues, so I would say focus, that, once I, start thinking about something, I'm like focused on that and figuring it out.
Wow. Do you have any final words for our listeners before I wrap it up for us?
I think, first of all, you've gotten here and through hard work, and that, you should trust your instincts. I feel like the times that I haven't trusted my instincts are the times that I, made choices that, were not the best for me and, ended up changing. So I think, trusting your instincts, again, figuring out what you enjoy, and just having a plan. So having a plan for what you'd like to do, short range, 5-year, 10-year plan. So having a plan, but being flexible. So, new circumstances will come up. You'll get offered a job, or, something will change. So, being open to those opportunities and like seizing them when they come by. I think, that would be my advice.
Wow. That's beautiful. No, thank you so much. And to all our listeners, first, I just want to thank Uma so much. I think I could not ask for a better day to spend the last day of 2025. This was such an incredibly powerful and inspiring session. And I think what I really realized is from your journey with having so much drive, courage, and calm, all the right opportunities meet you and guide you to where you need to be. So thank you so much. And I wish everyone a very, very happy new year. And also want to leave a little gentle reminder to everyone that, New Year's, we all are setting new resolutions and new goals. And sometimes halfway through January, things got to go sideways and you never have to wait for a new year to start again. Every new day, you have the same opportunity to start again. So I hope 2026 is an amazing year for everyone. And thank you, Uma and Vince, again for this incredible session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you, Kavita. Happy New Year, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks. Wonderful.